Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprints. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, even throughout the summer. So we ask that you like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Of course, as always, you can download it and listen to it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. Parliament is out. It adjourned last week with a bit of a bang. And to talk about that and much, much more, who else would we have on the show this week but the dynamic duo of Glenn Motz and Larry Brock. So we have Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner, and Brantford Brant. Thank you, gentlemen, once again.
It's great to be here.
Always a pleasure.
I
have one quick question.
Yes.
When are we going to rename this show the Schmale, Brock, and Motz podcast?
We should. We really should. We'll have to get, maybe that's a summer project.
I think so.
Yeah, maybe that's a summer. Not a bad idea.
But always a pleasure.
well,
always a pleasure to be on your show.
I thought, who else should we have on to wrap up this session of Parliament and get your thoughts on it? What grade do you give it? If you give it this session of Parliament, if you give it anything more than an F, I think you can leave now. No, but seriously,
Well,
what do you get? How do you think it went?
Man, it's obviously an F, a big, fat F. But where do you start to support that, justify it? There's so many different aspects of the failures of this government. Where you can start on C-21, you can start on the Emergencies Act, you can deal with Bernardo transfer, you can deal with so many other things, the foreign
Soft on
interference,
crime legislation,
soft on crime, bail reform, like on and on and on, and all the scandals. It's like, wow. I'm surprised the NDP hasn't dropped him like a hot potato yet.
I'm pretty sure too. Larry, your thoughts?
Mine's an HF.
Oh, an HF, wow.
Hypocritical failures.
You're adding the Brock standard.
8 years
right.
of abject failure right across the board. And I think from my perspective, Jamie, as a as a first-time politician, I was hoping to see politics done differently. I was hoping to see that promises made would be promises kept. I was hoping to see that there would be some truth in what Justin Trudeau promised Canadians by looking Canadians right in the eye, as I am right now looking into this camera, where he promised to have the most revolutionary type of government this country has ever seen. Hallmarks of transparency, accountability, and it's just been nothing, as my colleague has indicated, nothing but complete failure from top to bottom.
In the last 4 years, I'm kind of happy he hasn't kept his promises, because I think we would have been way worse shape than we are right now. We have crime that's up, violent crime's up, repeat offenders on the. We have teenagers being stabbed in the subway system in Toronto and elsewhere. We have stabbings on the rise. Are you hearing this in your constituency?
The frustration that I hear, not only in my riding, and other ridings and other colleagues, is that there seems to be no support any longer for law enforcement, and that comes from the government level. So the fact that they introduced legislation over the years that went soft on crime, that ignores victims. You fought your entire career, like I did, for the victims of these crimes. And to ensure that we focus on a criminal, that the system is set up to ensure that those who are responsible are dealt with according to law. But when things are watered down to the point where the law enforcement people who actually arrest people, investigate, find who's responsible, charge them. When that happens and they are out within hours, in many circumstances, to reoffend again, it makes you wonder why. Makes you wonder, what's the purpose of this? So the criminals are no longer afraid of the justice system because this government has basically taken its teeth away.
I'll go one step further, and I think I mentioned this at least once, if not twice, on your program, Jamie. Criminals love this Liberal government. I saw that as a Crown prosecutor. I saw the confidence of these criminals coming in knowing full well that it didn't matter what I had to say, that didn't matter what type of opposition I put up, either at the bail stage or at the trial stage, that even if they were convicted, because of the soft on crime agenda this government has introduced since 2015, it's really put shackles on the ability of our judges to do the right thing. It clearly favors the rights of the criminals over the rights of the communities and the victims.
Do you also think there might be another step to this as well? The Liberals, I find, like to use a crisis for an opportunity, right? Like crime is up, violent crime is up on their behalf because of the actions they took in various pieces of legislation. But then to implement their agenda, they can say, well, violent crime is up, then we have to confiscate as many firearms as possible.
Well, look what they did in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
We had the horrific mass shooting and killing in Nova Scotia. And they used that travesty to then introduce their May of 2020 Order in Council firearm ban. You know, hundreds of firearms that, you know, as the evidence is coming out, like then interfering in the actual investigation through the commissioner to say, you know, they want information to try and support their position. It turns out that, you know, the accused in this matter was not a licensed firearm owner. He obtained his firearms illegally, and no matter what legislation they would have introduced, it wouldn't have prevented this from happening, unfortunately. So they've used every possible means to try and dupe an otherwise unknowing public into believing that they're actually doing something for public safety. The stats say otherwise.
And the crisis, to your point, is the significant number of killings of police officers across this country.
9 in the last 18 months.
It seemed that the death of Officer Purcell, the OPP officer near my riding, just outside of my riding in southwestern Ontario, became a catalyst for reforms, a catalyst for change, a catalyst for advocacy. Police associations, police chiefs, premiers of provinces and territories. And yet there was still pushback by Minister Lametti, still pushback in the belief, trying to propagate this belief that our justice system was still working, that our bail system was still working. He was still tagging those lines at our Justice Committee. Nothing to see here. The system is adequate. Only until this government received the extreme backlash that they did from coast to coast to coast, that they introduced what they deemed to be a bail reform bill. Bill C-48 has yet to be debated at second reading in the House, yet to be studied at committee. It is a dangerously flawed piece of legislation. It is not a reform bill. And if we're looking for future content throughout the summer, I would love an opportunity, Jamie, to come back and explain to our audience the ABCs of what this bill is and the ABCs of our bail system in Canada. Explaining it in plain language so that everybody can understand and realize that this is just a talking piece, a piece of propaganda to make the government look as if they're doing something to address community safety.
And even beyond that, but yes, it's your show, fellas. I think we're renaming it. I think we talked about that. But even aside from the public safety, the kind of the one step further, we always had a suspicion that the Liberals wanted to have more government control. They would rather more spending, more government-decided industry leading the way, if you will, rather than private industry selling to the marketplace, right? We have big corporations selling to government, them picking winners and losers in the marketplace. You saw this during the pandemic. 40% of what they decide to print and borrow had nothing to do with COVID, but was couched in the language of COVID, right? So you saw their, I think, true agenda, which is massive amounts of spending, buying votes, and on the other side, you saw what happened when the protests were in Ottawa. I think that also showed the other side, that they have no problem using the maximum force of government to quell any dissent to their agenda, couple that with C-11, the censorship bill, and many others. I think this kind of, for all to see, their true colors.
Well, you know,
if you disagree with me, say
no,
that.
No, I don't. I think I'll even take it the Larry Brock step further, and that is to suggest that many of the people that write into my office, and I'm sure many MPs' offices, suggest that this is a very socialist agenda. When government tells the Canadians, you know what, we have a better idea. We will look after you. Canadians need to realize that government can't give you anything they haven't taken
That's
from
right.
you first.
Exactly.
Right? We all know that saying, and it's so true. But this government has lost their way. They have lost the moral authority to lead this country, certainly our prime minister, to govern absolutely. And they are. I mean, any successive government following who has a different agenda, has a different, getting Canada back, which will be what our conservative position certainly is. It's going to take years and years and years to undo, generation, to undo the damage that was done in 8 short years. It's unbelievable. I've been around longer than both of you gentlemen as far as age. I know you wouldn't know it, but
No, I thought you were in your 20s.
yes. But the radical thought and then the language that's being used, as you had indicated earlier, to try and convince Canadians that they're actually being helped by a government who's doing nothing but destroying our country.
The government's causing the problem, then trying to swoop in with a so-called solution. And of course,
It's a recipe for danger.
yes.
What's the
It
old
is
saying, Larry?
creating such fear in this country that I'm having constituents, and I have, as you know, Jamie, a very large social media following. And I've got people from all corners of this country really debating whether or not they want to continue to live in this country.
Right.
And we shouldn't be having this discussion in the 21st century. We should be leading the world in terms of, and we still have this reputation that immigrants want to settle here, but they settle here and they often say, I'm better off going back to my home country.
Right.
That was not the promise that we made to immigrants around the world. This country was built on immigration. And God knows we still need immigration to fill a number of positions that are not being met in this country. But the danger of this government rhetoric, taking away our fundamental freedoms, taking away our constitutional rights, the whole aftermath of the convoy movement and the actions taken by this government, with an expectation that, and Glenn and I, as you know, are both on the Joint Parliamentary Committee to study the invocation of the Emergencies Act, and we had the Rouleau Commission, but there's still one piece of a crucial piece of evidence that's still outstanding out there, and that is, by what legal authority did you exercise the right to invoke this particular act?
Yes.
And to Justice Rouleau, when he asked Justice Lametti that same question, Justice Lametti said, well, I can't deliver that. And Justice Rouleau's comments are, well, I guess we're going to have to trust you. Canadians do not trust this government. And that is a really sad statement for a MP to be making at this point.
But it's true.
But it is true.
I mean, you look, I read recently, you never trust the person who, or the government or whatever, to solve a problem that they themselves created.
Yeah, yeah.
That's exactly what Canadians need to realize. You can't trust the Liberal government to solve the problems they've created themselves. We need a full-scale change of government, and I have probably never experienced the erosion of public trust in institutions like government, like law enforcement, over the last decade, 8 years for sure.
And I'm hearing it on the justice side. So many people, I say predominantly the number of my supporters, saying, Larry, we do not have a justice system. We have a legal system. A legal system that is being dictated by this Liberal government to advance their interest. And those interests are protecting the rights of the accused.
Well, this is how I think the left continues to win elections. Not just in Canada, but around the world as well. It keeps that division going. It keeps the fact that you might be maybe against your neighbor for whatever reason, whatever the government tells you the reason is, and then you're looking at them rather than looking at the government and noticing, well, I'm sure many people have noticed that the price of groceries are through the roof, the cost of energy is through the roof, but if you're more or less looking somewhere else because the government is pointing out that your neighbors are awful, evil human beings, you're not actually focused on how horrible the government has managed the situation or created in the first place.
Correct. It's not just demonizing Canadians. It's demonizing duly elected representatives from across this country that constitute the opposition? How dare we criticize
how
the
dare we ask
government
questions?
for these wonderful solutions and wonderful objectives that they're trying to achieve? The number one role of the opposition is to hold this government to account. And quite often that requires, in my opinion, a prosecutorial approach. And God knows we've had so many scandals over the last 8 years. There's an abundant amount of material that we can prosecute on. But it's also important that we give Canadians hope and we show Canadians that we are indeed a sophisticated opposition, that we are ready to govern in the next, following the next election.
Hopefully soon.
And ready to bring out truth.
Right.
That's one thing that's been hidden in this particular government, the Liberal government, is truth is a moving scale, and on many, many fronts. And I am so looking forward to a time when we have a Poilievre conservative government in the next election that will rid the rot. And nothing to see here. If we don't talk about it, then nothing's happening. If we don't get caught, then it didn't happen. Like, people are expecting a government to be accountable to them who elected them.
What we don't want is a prime minister who is caught in a crisis where clearly there's been a breakdown of accountability to look Canadians in the face and say that this is a learning moment.
Yeah.
For all of us.
For all of us. Well, I didn't create this
We
problem.
didn't create the mess.
That's a learning opportunity for you.
And
not me.
it really
Yeah.
begs the question. Happens once, I can understand. Maybe twice, I can understand it. When you have a series of significant senior ministers who, for whatever reason, somehow are not funneled the information that impacts this nation on a myriad of issues involving a number of ministers, it really begs the question, what really is contained in these mandate letters that this prime minister delivered? Is it, if there's a crisis, you want to insulate yourself so that you can tell Canadians, I wasn't aware of it. Someone else didn't deliver the message. Okay? That's not accountability. That is not transparency. The latest being Minister
Some nameless,
Mendocino.
faceless
Right?
person. Somewhere,
the buck
somewhere out
stops
there.
with him.
Right.
He is the head of that Ministry of Public Safety. If he can't do the right thing and resign, he has completely lost the trust. Lost the trust of this House. He's lost the trust of Canadians.
My most laughable part of this whole session, I know everyone's different. We talked about our favorites, and I don't necessarily in all seriousness, but was when Justin Trudeau was at a panel at Ottawa University and basically saying, well, I didn't tell anyone to get vaccinated. I didn't tell anyone that there'd be consequences. Like, what kind of revisionist history are we talking about now?
Selective memory.
That is unbelievable. Yes. And nobody on that stage challenged him.
No.
Nobody said,
Why
well,
would you,
what
why
about...
would you challenge the Prime Minister?
Yeah.
Right?
And the crowd just, I can't remember what conference he was at or where he was speaking. I know there's an Ottawa University background, but nobody said, I think you got that wrong. And nobody in the media followed up too and said, what are you talking about? You grounded people.
Yeah.
But that's, anyways, that's mine.
I can see our host is completely frustrated, as are these two members of Parliament frustrated, as are millions of Canadians. It is time for change.
Yep.
It is time for an open, honest, transparent, accountable government led by our leader, Pierre Poilievre.
And when government is not having their number one priority is to maximize their citizens' freedoms, we have a problem, and we definitely have a problem with Justin Trudeau.
Indeed, we do.
We're pretty much out of time. You know you get the last word. Glenn Motz. You look like you're ready to say something.
Well, as you gentlemen were talking previously, I couldn't help but be troubled by the division that has been sown with this government and with this Prime Minister, rather than uniting us. When we just around Canada Day, we have to recognize we do live in a good country. There is hope for us. There is hope for this country. Canadians are losing hope. I mean, every week I get phone calls from people who say, I'm losing hope. Like, what are you guys doing? What can we do? And the reality is, you know what? A change of focus of a government, a change of priority of a government, where we govern for the people, not of the people. I think that'll make a big difference. And again, a change of ideology that it's about improving people's lives and in this country. And it's great to be back in the riding and to have the opportunities to share that hope message of hope with Canadians again. This government will go, the current one, and it will be replaced by a government who actually takes the governing of this country seriously.
To speak to normal people outside the Ottawa bubble.
Yes,
Justin Trudeau should.
My final
take that
words,
advice.
it's time to flush the rot of this inept government. It's time to bring back the promise that Canadians should have in the country. And to my primary focus of being a member of Parliament for Brantford-Brant is to instill that element of trust that Canadians definitely need to have with our elected officials.
That's why you two are the dynamic duo, I got to tell you. Larry Brock and Glenn Mott. So Glenn's from Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner in Alberta. Larry Brock from Brantford-Brant in Ontario. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. It's always a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Jamie.
Good wrap-up of the parliamentary session. Love having you on. We'll try to get you in the summer at some point.
Worth a final handshake.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time as well. We hope you enjoyed that show. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. There are eyes and ears that need to hear this message, need to see it, that there's normal human beings talking about this kind of stuff. And please remember, you can download it and listen to it at your convenience anytime on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. New content every single Tuesday. We're not taking Tuesday off. Next week, be sure to join us. Until then, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That is the blueprint.